Awesome. Thanks, Brian. And yeah, thanks to the Gildre team for setting this up. Always enjoy doing these and appreciate everybody jumping on here. Appreciate it. Little introduction of myself. My name is John Kennelly. I've been a Gildre member for a while now. I've been a lot of my career spent in the tech space. So worked for a few startups, kind of seeing the ups, downs, sideways movements that happen in that world. Went through a Google exit, Apple exit, also grew a company that I was sure was going to be a unicorn and was doing 20 million in revenue. And then not long after shut it down. So kind of all the good and bad, I've seen it. And for the last 18 months, I've been running a business that used to have a different name and I now call iHateSales, which we will get into why it's called that. But I'm sure everyone has some sort of reaction to that name one way or the other. And today, we're going to talk really first and foremost about founder-led sales. I know, Gildre is a community made up largely of founders. Some of you might be out there selling. Some of you might be resisting being out there and selling. But either way, I'll kind of talk about the virtues of founder-led sales. And then we'll just get into some examples. So we're going to look at examples of a really bad cold outreach and a couple of examples of a really good cold outreach. And I'll get into why in both cases there. And I've definitely reserved time for this to be hopefully as helpful and as interactive as possible. If people want to be brave and volunteer for the strategies or the outreach they're using and get some feedback live, happy to do that. If people just want to ask questions and go back and forth, happy to do that as well. Hope to make this as valuable for everybody as possible. I know your time is precious in the middle of a work day, so hope this is a really good hour of your time. So just jumping right in, I mentioned the name of my company is iHateSales. So first, let's talk about why do we hate sales? I think in some way, shape, or form, a lot of people have a very visceral, often negative reaction to sales. And I think the reason why is we don't hate sales. We hate bad sales. We hate somebody spamming our inbox, selling us something we don't need, right? We hate going to buy a car and, trying to get upsold to a car that we can't afford or that's too big for what we want, right? That's what people hate. People don't hate sales. I mean, listen, everyone on this call is wearing clothes and using a computer and somebody sold you those things, right? And you bought them because you needed them. And whoever, wherever you bought them, whoever sold it to you, they understood what you needed and why you needed it. And so you bought it. Right. Sales is not a dirty word, but listen, especially if you have founder on your LinkedIn, this screenshot I have here, it's not fun, right? You're constantly being bombarded with proposals you didn't ask for and automation tools you don't need. And just generally speaking, trash that is not helpful. And, I think there's just a lot of really common mistakes that have always been made in sales. In 2025, those mistakes get made in different ways. I think as much as there's a ton of value to using AI and automation, it also has become a vehicle that has just sort of poured gasoline on bad cold outreach. People can do more of it. They can do it faster. And it's not necessarily getting better. The volume is just increasing. So, I think when sales works, we don't even notice it. Good sales feels very organic. If you run a good sales process, people don't feel like they're getting sold to. They feel like you're helping solve their problems in exchange for money. So, I think a lot of people have probably made a sale without even realizing it. And like I said, you've definitely been sold to without realizing it on a very regular basis. So getting into founder-led sales, I think, this is a very common thing. It's something that clients that I work with say often. And it's something that some of you might have thought as well is, I'm not in sales, I'm a founder, I'm a CEO, right? I'm a product person, I'm an engineer, I'm a lawyer, I'm an accountant, whatever it is. I'm not in sales. I didn't start this company to be a salesperson. Bad news for you. You are one, whether you want to be one or not. And I think a lot of people just say, well, I'll just hire a head of sales and, we'll get this going and I'll just hand everything off to them and they can sell. In my opinion, if your business is doing less than $1 million in revenue, probably even higher threshold than that, but let's use that as a round number. If you're doing less than $1 million in revenue, in my opinion, the best possible way you could spend your time is learning what keeps your customers up at night. What problems do they have? What are the problems they're dealing with? And are you capable of solving them with your current product or service? And if you're not, what do you need to change to make it something that they would pay for. I think that the best sales process starts with discovery. And if you're a founder, it's invaluable to go and ask your customers questions, right? I think, yes, it might lead to a sale, but it also might lead to adding features to your product that you can sell to someone else down the line. So I think people hear the word sales and they think of it in a very transactional fashion. They don't think of it as something that might be kind of additive to their business, cross-functionally. But if you're a founder, there's just no better use of your time, in my opinion, than getting in front of your customers. It's going to make everyone who works for you better. It's going to make your product better. And it's going to help you close deals. So I think there's a lot of resistance out there as a founder to actually getting on the field and selling. And of course, I'm biased because this is my life's work, but I really think there's no more valuable way to spend your time as a founder than just on the field with your customers. So where to start, right? I think this is especially for founders who don't have a sales background, right? If you're a founder of a service business or a tech startup and you have a sales background, you might want to jump on this webinar right now. I'm just kidding, please stay. But I think for people that don't have a sales background, honestly, learning sales can feel like learning to speak a foreign language. It feels daunting. And the first place to start is always going to be defining your ideal customer profile. And this, to me, is the number one mistake that founders make. And the reason I say that is if you're a founder and you're in the trenches building a product or building out a service offering, you are drinking your Kool-Aid. You love the product. You love the service. You think, man, I nailed it. Everybody needs this product. This is so applicable across the board. I know every single business owner on the planet has this problem. I'm going to go sell this to everybody. You're going to end up selling it to nobody if that's your mentality. I have a couple of examples here of kind of a bad ICP and a good ICP. My product is for tech companies. Wrong. My product is for US-based tech companies doing 1 million to 5 million revenue who are struggling to scale beyond their first 500 customers. That is an example of a legitimate, specific ICP. I think, if you try to boil the ocean, if you try to sell your product to too broad of an audience, you're just not going to be able to get in the customer's head well enough to sell it. And you're going to end up with a product instead of a product that is an A+ for a very specific subset of users, you might end up with a B- product that people kind of like, but nobody really feels compelled to buy because it doesn't speak to their problem set specifically enough. So to me, this is the building block that every process needs to start with, is just being very clear on who you're for. Who is this for? Sell it to one person first, right? Like, don't try to sell it to billions of people. Sell this to one person and then learn a little bit about that person and see if there's people out there like them. Then sell it to a second person and then a third and then a fourth. And then see how many people fit into that profile of those first couple of customers, and scale it from there. But I think it's very understandable as a founder. You have to believe in what you're doing. You have to believe this is something that could change the world, that millions of people could end up using. But you got to take baby steps to get there. And you got to start with defining the customer you serve. Next step is to be curious. I don't know if there's any Ted Lasso fans, but it's one of my favorite shows. And there's a great scene where Ted talks about being curious. And that's always kind of stuck with me. I also heard a great quote, and I'll have to Google and figure out where I heard this. This is a quote I stole from somebody. Interested people are interesting, which means when you do define your ICP and you understand what customer you think you need to be going after, be curious. Learn as much as you possibly can about that customer's world. Learn what keeps them up at night. Learn what problems they have. If your customer started a business, learn why they started that business. Learn where they worked before that. Don't just feature dump. I think another very common and natural mistake, especially if you're a founder with a technical background, is to get on the phone with a customer and word vomit features on them. It's very natural because you've spent your time, your life building a product. You want to just tell everyone all the bells and whistles it has, but that's not what your customer wants to hear, right? Your customer wants to know that you understand them, And the only way you can understand them is to ask them an insane amount of questions. That's the first step, right? So be curious, learn as much as you can about their world. Typically for me, the first time I speak to a potential customer, I speak almost none of the call. If it's a 30-minute call, I'm hoping to speak for 3 minutes or less on a call. I think, everyone on this call has been sold to by a bad salesperson, and chances are if it was a 30-minute call, they probably spoke for 28 minutes. So I think, being curious and asking questions is the way to creating a really powerful founder-led sale. It's also just a great way to learn potential features that you need to develop or potential services you need to start offering for your business. And people who, everyone here has a job. Some of us have multiple jobs. This is your job. Your job is to talk about what you do every day. And people are going to be okay answering questions, right? I think there's a natural fear sometimes when it comes to doing discovery and asking questions. Well, I don't want to seem nosy. I don't want to pry. This is what people do for a living. They get paid to talk about it. So if you ask people questions about their day to day and about their job, typically they're going to answer them and they're not going to really push back. So I think once you define that customer, next step really is to dive in and be curious. So if you define the customer, you've had a good discovery conversation. Now we got to go in for the kill, right? And I think if you've done the first 2 steps well, if you have a very narrowly defined customer and you understand what keeps them up at night, you can then tailor a close, a sales pitch to be very specific and natural from there. I kind of have, the quote on the left is kind of a joke, but I think it's something we all probably experience a lot. Thanks so much for your time. Here's a completely cookie cutter description of our services with pricing options. We get that a lot, right? Especially, in the tech world, that just generally doesn't work, right? I think obviously this is all dependent on the product or service that you sell. And in the long run, we want this to be scalable. But if you're pre-$1 million in revenue, if you're doing founder-led sales, explain to your customer that, hey, you heard them, right? You understand what they're dealing with, and the solution you're offering them is perfectly positioned to solve the problems they have, right? I believe if you run the first 2 parts of this process right, the last part doesn't even feel like a sale, right? I think that's what's really important here is that there's the fear and stigma around selling or being salesy, usually is because people didn't do the first 2 steps properly, right? If I don't understand you properly, if I don't understand your problems, if I don't understand if you actually need my product or service, yeah, I'm going to come across salesy because you don't want what I'm selling, right? But if I know, okay, this person is wasting $10,000 a month and I can sell them something for $5,000 a month that eliminates that waste, they're going to say yes, right? So I think this is really a process, to get on my soapbox for a minute. I think a lot of the problems, whether it's posts you see on LinkedIn, DMs you get, cold emails you get, I think there's a lot of desire right now for founders to skip this step. Well, I'm just going to send 10,000 cold emails that are AI generated and it's going to work perfectly and everyone's going to want to buy this. You can't skip ahead in this process. You have to follow the building blocks that allow you to learn about your customer. And if you do that, then once you start to cross these revenue thresholds, you can start to scale what you've learned. But if you're not in the trenches with your customers early, you can't skip ahead to scale because so, my opinion, this is not advantageous for my business to admit this. The best kept secret in sales is it's pretty easy, in my opinion, right? I think if you can have a conversation, which everyone here can, we all do it all the time. You have a conversation, you can sell. I love to cook, so I think it's kind of like that. My opinion is that if you can read, you can cook. You can look at a recipe and follow the instructions, you can cook. Even though a lot of people find cooking very daunting and don't do it, I think the reality is if you can read, you can cook. I think sales is a lot like that. If you can have a conversation, if you know how to ask people questions, you can sell. And like I said, bad business for me to admit that because my job is teaching people how to do it. So if I admit to you guys that it's easy, maybe that's not a good plan for me. But I think it's important, especially if you've had, fears or challenges going out and selling Brian says he can cook, but I want to eat what he makes. I don't know. I mean, Brian, you live in Chicago. You must have a grill. I think that's like a mandatory thing if you live in Chicago. That's good.
Yeah, grilling's different, right?
Yeah, I can cook that. But I think the reality is there's a stigma. There's kind of a fear maybe that sales is more difficult than it is. But I think if you kind of follow a pretty basic structure, most people find it's easier than they expected. So I want to now get into kind of, let's get a little more tactical, look at some real examples of both kind of bad and good sales approaches and why they fall into those categories. So we're going to start on the bad side. So this is a DM, LinkedIn DM that actually a friend of mine got and sent to me, which is my favorite thing when people send me really bad sales. It happens pretty often. I love seeing really, really bad approaches and kind of, diving into what went wrong. I mean, I think there's a lot wrong here, right? Like, first of all, just calling yourself LinkedIn member, like not actually going about this, with a real LinkedIn account with a picture and a name. I don't know how that ever works for anybody, right? But then I think, the message it's technically in English, but it makes no sense. I read your information and felt that your experience was very consistent with my future local plans. Gene says it does that when they've been blocked or banned. There you go, right? I didn't even know that's why it looks like that, but it's a pretty bad sign if LinkedIn has blocked or banned you. But I think, the message itself, right? I don't even know what they're asking. It's completely unclear what this is even about. And so I think, a couple things about this, right? Like, obviously being human is the first thing, right? I got to know who you are and that you're a real person if I'm going to engage, but then be specific, right? This message is just a bunch of words smashed together. It's not at all clear what this person is asking for, right? If you want to go out and have a conversation with somebody and try to pitch something, you got to be specific, right? Everyone's got short attention spans now. So you have maybe one sentence to get my attention. Tell me why you reached out to me. And if it's relevant to me, I'll respond, which I have a message shortly. I'll go into a slide that is the kind of polar opposite of this, that does what this message trying to do incredibly. So this is another one. This is an email I got, and this is actually another community that I'm in. Someone basically spammed the entire community. And to the credit of Gildre, I've never seen this happen in here. And that's, again, just a credit to what you guys are building. Everything feels very genuine, but, we're all in this community because we're trying to learn from one another and support one another, right? Yes, I'm sure there are people in Gildre that are doing business with one another, but it all comes together very organically, and we probably don't even know it's happening, right? This guy took a community, email list. He sent a really poorly worded AI generated email. It's just not the way to do it, right? This is like almost like a bait and switch tactic, right? Like, he joined a community trying to genuinely engage and then spammed everybody. That's really, a lot of what we're talking about here in sales is built on trust, right? People buy from people that trust. And if you join a community and then spam everybody, you've lit trust on fire immediately. So I think just an example of kind of choosing the wrong channel and choosing a really poor tactic. Let's flip and be a little more positive here. So, and this is an email that I got recently that honestly blew me away. Completely cold email, and I was just super impressed by it. A couple things to note here. First of all, subject line is Adam Robinson. I'm not sure if everybody, I'm sure some people on here follow Adam Robinson on LinkedIn. I guarantee you Brian follows Adam Robinson on LinkedIn. But, Adam Robinson is he's a SaaS founder who's built a couple of really compelling businesses, and he does a phenomenal job of building in public. He talks about his business all the time. He's very real about how the revenue is growing. He talks when they have a bad month. He talks when they have a good month. I've learned a lot from him about how to post on LinkedIn. I'm a huge fan, and I follow him on LinkedIn, and it's public information that I follow him on LinkedIn. This guy who emailed me knew it. And he also knows that people who follow Adam Robinson, a lot of us are kind of rabid fanboys of Adam Robinson. So he made the subject line of this email, Adam Robinson. And guess what? I opened it. Not only did I open it, I'm now talking about it on a webinar and singing this guy's praises. So this guy knew Most people who follow Adam Robinson are huge fans. If I make the subject line Adam Robinson, this guy's probably going to open it. Then he got even more specific. He actually referenced a comment that I made on a post of Adam Robinson's. Now, I'm sure there's some automation going on here. So while being authentic is important, I think he found a way to automate this in a way that felt personal, which I'm okay with, right? I think using automation in a way that comes across as authentic is really hard, but if you can do it, it works, which it did in this particular case. So I think, I was, at first almost a little bit creeped out at how specific this was, but at the same time, it felt personal, right? So I kept reading. It's very concise, right? Look how short this email is. It's incredibly concise, short, to the point. We've all received emails, that are paragraphs long. To be honest, I don't read long emails from people that I know. If you send me a long email with several paragraphs, I don't care if you're my dad, I'm probably not reading it. So, I think being concise is just an absolute must, and he nailed it here. Once he got me to read the first sentence, my eyes quickly look down and I go, all right, well, there's only 2 more lines left. I'll just finish reading it. Unfortunately, in this case, he's selling a service I don't need, so I didn't actually buy anything here, but he made it clear why he reached out to me. He personalized it, and I've actually posted about him on LinkedIn and tried to flip him some business because I was just so impressed by what he did. I think this is just a 10 out of 10 example of what good cold outreach looks like.
And John, really quick, someone else had posed this question that wasn't able to make it, but looking at this email, right, and everyone else here, maybe you've kind of seen the same thing. Nowadays, you get kind of personalized videos, you get some kind of things that call out maybe a school you went to or things like that. I've had something that called out like a middle school, which I don't even know how they would have got that.
Whoa, middle school, really?
I think it's because, right, like it shows that I was in this neighborhood, and so, or like this is where I went to high school, so maybe they thought it was like a middle school in that region. But is there a line of being too personal? And I'll ask that, from your perspective, John, of like kind of giving those specific details, and for everyone else on this call, right, like, is there something that would turn you off or kind of, again, be too, I don't even want to say creepy, right? But it's like, how did you know these things, right? It's like really diving into that. So we'd love to kind of, John, hear your thoughts, and everyone else, as if, you feel a specific type of way about that.
Yeah, Brian, awesome question. I think for sure there's such a thing as being too personal, right? Like if I got a cold email with my address in it, I would be horrified, right? Personally, and I think a lot of this is a matter of personal preference. I've gotten the occasional LinkedIn DM with a video in it. Kind of creeps me out. If we've not met before, if you're completely cold and a stranger, it makes me cringe to get a video from somebody I don't know, who I've never seen before. It doesn't work for me. Now, if we've had some level of interaction before, if we've emailed, if we've messaged, even the slightest bit of back and forth, okay, send me a video, make it personalized. I can live with that. But I think this is a little bit I think sales is part art, part science, right? I don't have an answer of this is exactly what is too personal and this is what isn't. But the answer to your question to me is for sure you can get too personal. And I think this email to me is like the perfect example of the right amount of personal because, it's public information that I follow Adam Robinson on LinkedIn. It's easy to find that. The comment I made on this post is public for everyone to see on LinkedIn, right? So, like if I had, somehow had like dinner with Adam Robinson 3 months ago and this email said, "Hey, I noticed you had dinner with Adam Robinson in Chicago back in November," it would be like calling the police, right? So I think it's just a fine line, and it's also just a matter of personal preference, right? So you can guess wrong sometimes, right? It's possible that someone could have received this email that I received and been freaked out by it. I was able to quickly deduce why he reached out in this way, and it didn't me. But long-winded answer, but hopefully that is what you're looking for.
You're muted, Brian, and I think I was muted. But yeah, anyone else have any thoughts on that too? Whether if that's things you've liked or you've done yourself.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I like using comedy. Okay, so I think a big part of it's like breaking the tension before there's even tension. So like especially with like messaging, right? You only make it personal because you don't have enough information, but you have the profile in front of you. So if you do the due diligence and kind of see what they're posting and what they're not posting, you have some leverage, right? So you have to do some due diligence on, for example, their podcast or webinar, or who they're speaking to, or their website, and what their testimonials are, who those people are. So I think there's a lot of, it's like a spider web of intricacies, right? But the more you go deeper, the more you know, and the more you sell better, because a lot of those things are maybe the same values you have or you don't have, but it doesn't matter. It's like being offended, I think, is just perspective, right? So it's more like, if you're offended, that means you should understand the person's feelings first. That's called empathy, right? Or emotional intelligence rather than IQ. So I guess I kind of use that as a mechanism of really understanding people. I'm like, recently I got a very large client from Australia who, he doesn't know anything about medical devices, but he's ex-Navy. He was in the Navy for 25 years, and then he got into med tech for a breathing device. So like, these things they have a story to it because he has a story behind it, and you learn the story, and then you kind of tell yours, and then that's how it becomes organic, in my opinion.
Great. Appreciate that, Amit. Thanks for sharing. All right, John, I'll give it back to you.
Awesome. Yeah, I think just to echo what, Amit says, I mean, obviously, like, we're all kind of doing our best here. If someone gets offended, there's a chance that, they misunderstood your intent. And I think, it's like I said, this is part art, part science, right? So there's certainly attempts I've made at, cold outreach or getting new leads that I thought were just going to be a bullseye. And then I got an email that said, "Hey, never talk to me again." Okay. I guess wrong. So it's, this is not one size fits all, but I think if you take the right approach, if you focus on kind of learning about your customers and understanding them, you're going to win more than experience. So this is a cold LinkedIn DM that is the polar opposite of the first cold DM that I got. And, what I want to call out here is, first of all, she was authentic, right? I don't think I've ever seen anyone type the sentence, "health insurance is my jam," but it's authentic, right? Like, it's very clear that that's her personality, and topic that is not super fun to talk about, saying it's your jam. All right, that's unique. I'm intrigued, right? I've never heard that phrase before, and I just think it sounds like a real person wrote it. So I'm gonna keep reading, right? It's targeted. She knows everyone struggles with health insurance, especially self-employed. Well, right there on my LinkedIn, I checked the box for self-employed. So it's very clear that she knows that, and she's using the data that's publicly available on LinkedIn, and she's right. In my particular case, fortunate enough to be mooching off of a wife with a corporate job with benefits. So I don't actually have this problem, but it is, an incredibly common problem for people that are self-employed. So, 2 for 2 on her part. And, just like the email we just looked at, this is succinct, right? She just wants to help. She wants to talk about health coverage and learn, unfortunately, like I said, I don't have this problem. I'm very glad that I don't, but if I didn't have a wife with a corporate job, I for sure would have responded, and we would have had a conversation, and maybe I would have bought from her. Same as the last email, I posted about her on LinkedIn and said, "Hey, if you're an entrepreneur looking to talk about health insurance, call Amanda." So, I kind of reshared this and tried to flip her some business because even though I didn't buy from her, I hope other people do. So I think this is just a great example of cold outreach working, because she understood the problem that people like me and have. And technically she guessed wrong. I don't have that problem, but I'm in the minority when it comes to that. So this is really well done. I was super impressed by this. I think she, she just kind of exemplified what good, authentic cold outreach looks like. This is an email that I received from a client of mine. I cannot tell you how grateful I am. Look forward to working together, generating amazing outcomes. So this is a real email that I got from somebody that I closed, and is, in a sales process here where I started with just asking questions, learning about their business. And the end of the particular sales process that I'm referencing in this email, I actually didn't ask for their business. The call ended with the person saying, "Hey, so how do we work together? Is there a way I can pay you to help me with this?" And I said, "Yeah, sure. I can find a way for you to give me some money." So I think, like I said, learn to love sales and magic happens. I think if you take a kind of authentic human approach to learning about people, asking them questions, understanding what keeps them up at night, and then solving those problems, it just turns into a really smooth close. And in some cases, they will do the close for you, right? I think the best salespeople don't even ask for the business. Their customers ask how they get started. I think that's, I think to kind of bring this full circle, I can't remember if I got the email or the cold message from Michael or Brian, but I joined Gildre off of a cold outreach, right? And it was like very clear that Gildre understood me. They understood the challenges that a founder like me has. I responded to cold outreach, talked to Brian, and said, hey, how do I sign up? Right. So I think, literally hosting this webinar because of a cold message, because that's how I ended up joining Gildre. So, I think if you understand your customer and you know what keeps them up at night, they're going to ask you how they can pay. So that's it in terms of the presentation. Happy to take any questions or kind of riff on anything. If anyone is brave enough to share what they're doing now on the sales side and get feedback, I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to give people minutes back in their day if there's not questions, but I'll try to be quiet for a second. I went on this whole rant about how good salespeople don't talk a lot, and I just spent 35 minutes yapping. But hopefully people got some value, and hopefully there's some questions.
Amazing. So yeah, thank you for that, John. Anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute yourselves. You can type it in the chat. I've got a couple that people had sent in that weren't able to make it, so I'll ask those at the end, but wanted to give everyone a chance first. So anyone have any immediate questions for John or feedback that they want to share?
I thought it was super relatable to kind of break down sales into that. And when I originally transferred from Zipcar to Uber Freight like years ago, selling in logistics, they said was like the hardest kind of sales role, right? Selling to brokers and especially Uber. Like, oh, why is Uber calling me, right? In the brokerage space. But making it more relatable definitely helped. And it seemed to be that, like you said, like they wanted Uber to be in that business for them, like after the conversation we had.
Love that. Thanks for sharing, Dan. And that kind of brings me, so I'll ask this question here, and then if no one's got anything else, we can kind of wrap up. But for a lot of founders here, whether you're building a traditional product, you're building your agency or consultancy, a community, or a B2C product, right? Like sales applies to all of that. So for John, for you, like when you think of, obviously a lot of this kind of does pertain maybe to the traditional B2B of, hey, let me get you health insurance, right? Let me get you whatever you need. But how do you treat sales from a perspective where it's maybe not necessarily trying to get someone to join, pay for a service, but maybe you're getting someone to download Uber, which is a free app, right? And you use it. So like, how does sales kind of transcend outside of just that traditional B2B scope when founders are selling lots of different types of things?
Yeah, I think, I don't want to speak out of school because my experience lies primarily in B2B, but I do think a lot of this is about meeting your customers where they are, right? I think that is true of B2B. It's true of B2C, right? In the B2C space, it's about Uber. Uber is everywhere, right? Like, you can't watch a football game without 10 Uber Eats ads. Uber is plastered all over every airport because they want you to jump in and take an Uber home, home from the airport. I think Uber, just kind of throwing them out as an example, right? They're very good and hard in the fact that they have billions of dollars to spend, but they meet customers where they are, right? And this was true. I lived in San Francisco from 2009 to 2019. I watched Lyft and Uber become the thing, right? And like they met customers where they are. They had street teams out there handing out flyers saying, hey, like, don't take a taxi, don't get on the bus, like jump in this car with a pink mustache on it, right? So I think just whether you're selling B2B or B2C, meeting your customers where they are. And if it's B2B, we all spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, at least I do, but there are millions of business owners out there who don't use LinkedIn. They use Facebook, they use Twitter, they use TikTok, whatever it is. And so I think meeting your customers where they are means find the channel that they spend their time in and show up there and talk to them. That's the kind of long and short of that for me.
Perfect. To that, John.
I want to know your thoughts on, actually a question. I want to know your thoughts on, how to transition. I would say, like, obviously the first interactions usually like through like LinkedIn or messaging, right? Mm-hmm. Messaging, like I usually say texting is usually out of context, right? And it's like, it was that Key and Peele skit when they're going back and forth. They're like, do you want to hang out? So like, he's like, whatever. It's like, whatever? It's like, what does this guy think he is? It's like, you just don't know what the other person's feeling unless you put like an emoji or something, right? But that can only go so far. So like, how do you kind of like get the person on the same page without quote unquote offending them or quote unquote getting them on the same lane as you in that regard?
Yeah, I think you make a good point, which is that like text communication, I think can very easily be misinterpreted, right? Whether you're like slacking with someone who works for you and giving them feedback and they're like, oh no, I'm in trouble, right? Like it's very easy to misread written content. So, this maybe is more applicable to my business than most, but like I'm trying to get on a call with somebody sooner than later, right? Like I have a, CTA on my LinkedIn profile, book an appointment. Like that is I'm looking to move to that medium as right. Let's book a call. Let me learn about your business. Let's chat, right? Like I'm looking to get there as fast as possible because the sooner you can see that I'm a person, we can have a conversation, I can learn about you, the sooner I can find out if you're a good fit for me and if I'm a good fit for you. So that's to me, the name of the game is moving away from a LinkedIn DM as fast as possible. Even just moving to email is a step in the right direction, but yeah, getting out of the DMs as fast as possible is my kind of 2 cents.
Yeah, that makes sense. Actually, a personal story with Gildre. Actually, that's how me and Michael Frank met. So like we connected, and then we're both New Yorkers, so it's like obviously we talked about a lot of different things I won't mention publicly. NDAs were signed, but yeah, it's just that organic feeling was there right away. It's just the culture where we were born, raised, and like it was a very like organic conversation that led to me being here right now. So just has yeah.
Looks like Janine, I think maybe had a question in the chat, so I want to make sure I answer that.
Yeah, please.
Perspective on the best CTA questions for cold outreach. I just want to make sure I understand the question. You mean like, hey, I'm sending a cold message or email. I want to close with the action that I want someone to take, right? That's kind of the question there. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think this is of course dependent on the business that you're running, right? I mean, in Brian's example of like an app like Uber, I mean, the CTA would be like, click here to download my app, right? Like, I think if you are running a service business or if you're pitching a product that needs to be sold person to person, then the CTA would be, let me know, when you have 30 minutes to chat about this, here's a booking link, right? I think the sales process looks a little bit different based on the product that you're selling. I think everyone should have kind of a journey in mind of these are the 3 to 5 steps that someone needs to take to become a customer. And the goal of the first piece of cold outreach is to get them to take step 1, right? I think a really common mistake with a cold outreach is to jump ahead in the process, right? If I've never met you before, if I don't know you, I don't know where you're coming from. If you're trying to close me in cold outreach and put a link to buy or a link to check out here, very unlikely that I'm doing, right? Like figure out how many steps you think it takes for someone to become a customer. The first outreach needs to be about them taking step 1.
Love that. And I think just to build on that, it's really about building trust. Like you said, it's people are more likely willing to work with people, to join people, to do anything when you establish that trust. And I think the biggest thing for that is, it's tough to get someone on a call because it's a time commitment, right? You look at it like a date or anything. It's like very easy to kind of exchange messages, but to actually go out there and take time away from a busy schedule takes a lot. And so when we look at CTAs, it's like a lot of times I see messages where it asks like a really deep personal question, right? Like what's been the biggest struggle you've dealt with, over the past year? And that's a real problem that people might have, but something that they might not even share with their co-founders. Nevertheless, a cold outreach, DM from a stranger. And so I think to Janine and John and everyone's point, right? It's like the CTA, it can get to that level, but it has to build trust leading up to that point. And so when you get, I think, a string of messages,
Yeah, Brian, I think you make a great point, which is I think a really powerful way to do cold outreach is if you've had a few conversations with potential customers, you start to notice a common problem that they all have, right? Like I'll use Gildre as an example, right? Gildre is a community for founders to, feel supported. Maybe you're a founder and you're lonely and you feel like you need, community around you. I'm sure this is some part of the cold outreach strategy already, but, I think a great example of how to kind of assume their problem and make them feel comfortable is to say, hey, we've noticed that a lot of founders building something on their own are kind of feeling lonely. They're lacking a support network around them. We notice, or we are hearing that you might have this problem. I think gives someone the space to kind of admit that they are having the problem, right? Instead of asking them, hey, what's your deepest, darkest problem? Once you've had a few of these conversations and you feel like you have a good sense for what their problem might be, you can kind of put it out there. Hey, I've talked to a lot of founders like you. I hear you have this problem. Gives people the space to just sort of say, oh man, you nailed it. I do have that problem.
Love that. Absolutely. So yeah, with that being said,
time for another live one, John. I got a question. Like, what do you think of just this cold email outreach from Draper U, how they bolded, specific points. I'd like to understand maybe your thoughts on something like this as far as the first cold outreach email, because it did catch our attention.
Yeah, I mean, I think structurally it's good, right? It's pretty short. Bullet points usually work very well. Like my eye's gonna go kind of right to the bullet points. I mean, the only thing I don't love is like they get a little jargony here. I'd love to explore how Gildre and Draper U could align. Would you be open to discuss synergies? Like, that's making my eyes glaze over a little bit. Those are pretty jargony words, and I mean, to be honest, from Draper U, I would expect them to be writing in jargon. But I think overall, like the structure is good, the length is good. In general, I think using bold and italic in email can be effective. I mean, we're getting really into the weeds here. There is so much bold here that it's like, okay, the bold is losing its effect. Right? Like you want to use bold and italic in your email, then pick like 3 words to make bold, not 30 words, right? Like this is too much. It's like, at first glance, like it looks like the whole email is in bold.
Right.
So that I think is like not great. I think, like I said, using bold and italic to get people's eye, and bullet points totally works, but you have to be slightly more like selective about it. Like if it were me, I would have bolded 1 or 2 of the like company names and then quick 15-minute chat. Because that's the CTA, right? Like if I see nothing else in this email, I want you to see that I want to have a quick 15-minute chat, right? So yeah, like I think, like I would give this like a B-, probably. A lot of good things, but then kind of some of the tactics are a little bit overdone, basically.
What's kind of your thoughts on how many follow-up emails should someone, just in general, should someone do without a response, without kind of pestering and being annoying?
I typically only send 2. I think there's some people send infinity.
Yeah.
I think in general, like when I first started doing SaaS sales like 15 years ago, we had like a 3-sequence approach. We would do 3 and then we would give up. I think it's, personally kind of 2 feels right, but I think 3 is also fine. Anything more than that, like if I send you 3 emails, either like I have the wrong email and you're not seeing this, or like you are actively ignoring me. And so, I think 3 max in my opinion, but at the same time, I also am a big, like personally, if emails go to spam, I don't respond to them obviously because I don't see them. But if an email lands in my inbox, pretty often I will say like, stop calling me, right? That's actually like people maybe worry about that being mean, but like it's to your benefit and it's to the salesperson's benefit for you to say like, this is not for me, please leave me alone. It saves them some time and helps them learn, and it will help your inbox from getting flooded. So
awesome. Thank you, John.
Perfect. Well, if anyone else has any other questions kind of after the session, you can message John in Slack. John, I think you had shared your email as well in the deck, but we'll also share that presentation out. And so, thank you again for enlightening us and sharing more about the insights. And again, everyone here does founder-led sales, whether you're an agency, an individual, and product-based company. So hopefully this was helpful for you all. And John, we appreciate the insights. Looking forward to learning some more.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.